Recently, I've been watching a lot of old movies, and it's been a real fun time doing that. One movie I decided to watch recently was The Brave Little Toaster. This was a movie that I watched as a child and decided to watch again. It is an animated movie that was released in 1987. It is considered an animated musical fantasy film directed by Jerry Reese, who also worked on visual effects for Tron 1982. And The Brave Little Toaster is actually based off of a book called by the same name, The Brave Little Toaster, by Thomas M. Dish. This movie was distributed by Walt Disney and produced by Hyperion Pictures, who is mainly known for working on this movie as well as The Runestone 1991, which by the way is an American horror movie, that'll be important later, and also produced by the Kushner Lock Company, who worked on all of the Brave Little Toaster movies, including The Adventures of Pinocchio 1996, as well as Dorothy Meets Ozma of Oz, and Pound Puppies and the Legend of Big Paw. The Brave Little Toaster is set in a world where appliances and other electronics come to life and they hide when humans come into presence, kind of like Toy Story, but this was before Toy Story. And in fact, there are reports that The Brave Little Toaster 1987 was actually a major influence for Toy Story that would eventually come out in 1995. This movie's story focuses on 5 characters: a toaster, a lamp, a blanket, like a heated blanket, a little mini radio station, and a vacuum cleaner, who are left in a summer home for quite some time, in fact around 5 or so years, and they set off on an adventure to go find their master. They find purpose and meaning in life being used by their master, which in this example is a child. Like if a toaster makes toast for the kid, he's happy and he has a purpose. Same with all the other electronics in the house. If they get used, they become happy. The Brave Little Toaster currently has a 7.2 on IMDb, 3.5 by Letterboxd reviews, and a 79% on Rotten Tomatoes. It was released July 13th, 1987, around 1 hour and 30 minutes, including credits, and have earned around $2.3 million in the box office when this movie was released. Some would consider this forgotten media because not everyone knows about it too much. Some would consider it a cult classic. I consider it kind of both. I do have fond memories of the movie, and I'll get more into that later. But yeah, that's The Brave Little Toaster. Now, why am I talking about it today? Well, I may have watched this movie with a lot of rose-tinted glasses. And I mean a lot of them. And I mean really heavy tinted. This movie, upon rewatching it as an adult, is just insane. Call it a animated film is not doing it justice. This is straight up a horror movie. There are so many elements in this film that is just insane that I completely didn't understand, that flew over my head. Like, I would call this a horror movie, and honestly, speaking about it right now, I don't recommend this movie for children. That's kind of how messed up it is. Now, obviously, it's not like a gory movie, a violent movie, but there are some stuff that's pretty similar. Today, I wanted to do a deep dive on this film and talk about it. I've never really done one of these videos, and I've been wanting to do this for a while, and this is the perfect movie that I want to start this series in. And oh my god, I have some things to discuss. Now, of course, I will be spoiling this movie, so if you don't want to get spoiled, please go watch the movie and come back. Other than that, here is a deep dive on The Brave Little Toaster. So I do think it's a little bit important for me to go over The Brave Little Toaster, the book, the one made by Thomas. Originally, this was published as a novella in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction in August 1980. Then it was later published in April of 1986 as its own standalone book. Illustrations by Karen Schmidt. Now, one look at this book, and oh man, is this art just really unsettling. Unfortunately, I don't have the book as of right now. I'm going to try and get it at a local library. I don't really know if this book is hard to get, but I will see what I can do, and I will update the video if I do have them. Yeah, the art is very uncanny. You have this lifelike toaster that looks like it's just going on a little adventure, but man, I mean, just look at it. It looks very unsettling. Maybe that was the point of this book. I don't really know. I know a lot of books were trying to creep and scare the shit out of kids growing up back then, so maybe this is what it was going for, something a little subtle. But yeah, Thomas would also later make the Brave Little Toaster go to Mars, and man, I think we should just talk about the first book for now, because oh man, does that look insane. So yeah, while the film didn't really capture the exact art style that the book was going for, the film at least got the disturbing part right. I had also mentioned that I watched this movie as a kid, and yeah, that is true. I watched this movie a good amount of times, and I mentioned I have pretty fond memories of the movie. In fact, even before watching this movie, I thought this was going to be a really great movie, a really epic movie. A movie about a toaster, a vacuum, and a radio and all that, going to go see his master and traveling through the forest and, nothing absolutely batshit crazy was going to happen. And like I said, I was completely wrong. I do not remember this movie being this crazy. I remember the characters well. I don't really remember the music. I remember also treating my appliances pretty well with love also as a kid. And I'm wondering if my parents thought I was crazy or something. I also don't really remember this movie even being on. In fact, I actually remember the second Brave Little Toaster movie being on, TV channels way more than the first one. And maybe that was for a good reason. My parents also didn't have like a strong take or opinion on this film, mainly because it was another animated movie that their kids watched just to be, busy and occupied. So as mentioned, the main characters are a toaster, a lamp, a heated blanket, a radio, and a vacuum cleaner. These are the main characters. Toaster is played by Deanna Oliver, Lampy is played by Timothy Stack, Blanky was played by Timothy Day, Kirby the vacuum cleaner was played by Thurl Rosencroft, and the radio is played by John Lovitz. All five of them have a lot of experience in other films way back then, and I do think these characters are pretty well designed. I will say I like how each one of them kind of represent a different color. I know this may be a very weird thing to say, but I think it's important for a kids movie to understand the importance of color, and I will say these characters do look pretty good, honestly. One interesting thing that I did learn about this movie is that each character has a personality for a reason. Basically, every one of the main group's character has a personality trait that somewhat either opposes or represents who they are as an appliance. Hopefully this makes sense, but basically they wanted to have Blanky, who's supposed to be this electric blanket that's supposed to mean security, be very insecure without its owner. You have the bright lamp, who is very dim and doesn't really know all that much. You have Kirby, who's supposed to be a character who hold it all in and also has a nervous breakdown from doing that. Toaster is supposed to be warm and reflective, and radio is really just always switching moods, like a radio station. I think this is a really cool thing to learn, and it really just goes to show that they really did take their time with these characters and wanted them to be very unique and special for the plot. Now, the way this deep dive is going to go, I'm going to essentially talk about the entire movie, and throughout the movie I'm going to sprinkle in segments of certain things about the movie, like the characters, or the illustrations and art, or the editing, cinematography, places they go, and messages and all that. It'll all come together once I talk about the ending of the film. I've already mentioned and talked about the characters. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, these appliances are left in this summer home for a very long time, and I believe it was around 5 years, and they pretty much sit around the house. They don't do much. They actually keep the house very clean, which I would say if I came back to my summer house and saw that it was absolutely spotless, I would assume somebody has been living here. But yeah, the appliances all keep themselves busy by basically doing housework, and they do seem to love it. Sometimes they do get tired of it, but it seems like all of the main characters here do get along, and they don't really get tired of cleaning. And once in a while, Blanky, the character who seems like he misses the master the most, the main kid character who played or used all these appliances, seems like he really misses the master the most, and anytime he suddenly hears a car go by, he runs up and looks outside to hopefully anticipate the master coming home. And in this movie that does happen, but of course it's not the master, it's just another random car, and this of course gets Blanky upset. And it's pretty much implied that this does happen a good amount of times, so Blanky, being like this baby, more like the child character of the group, he was very upset about this the most. Now, if you were to see clips in this movie, you probably noticed that there is another character. This character that we are shown is Air Conditioner. That's his name. And yeah, pretty much most of the time, the characters' names are named after what they are, like Toaster is a toaster. Go figure. But yeah, Air Conditioner, he's a wall air conditioner unit who is placed in the wall. That's pretty much what you do with these units. And he noticed that all the characters, the 5 main characters, got all excited for the master coming home, and he takes this opportunity to basically make fun of them and be snarky towards them. This of course prompts them to all have a little bit of a conversation where essentially they get him to unalive himself. Yeah, they essentially roast him and tell him that, yeah, you're stuck in a wall, the master basically can't use you. This gets Air Conditioner very upset. He's upset that the master can't really use him, and he takes this opportunity to lash out and kind of self-implode or self-destruct. Basically, he explodes, but not like a crazy explosion. And some would say this was a justified crash out. If anything, this showed that he was the most upset out of any character in this house. 5 main characters see that the house is eventually going to be up for sale, so they take this opportunity to leave. Walk out the door and go find the master. Now, I want to talk about this because this part is important. Now, with our main group of characters, I'm just going to call them the main group. They want to go see the master, and they can't just walk out of the house because that would be too easy. So they decide to get a chair, hook it up to vacuum, because apparently vacuum can't even move that far without being plugged into something electrical, giving him power. You know, like a normal vacuum cleaner. You can't just move on its own. It needs to be plugged in to move. I'm talking about this right now because this will be important later. So they jerry-rig up a chair, everyone straps on and sets out on an adventure. And at first, it seems like it's going to be a very fun adventure. You know, everyone's singing along. They do have a musical piece right after they leave the house. And everything, you know, is going good, going according to plan. So right now, I want to take this opportunity to talk about a few things. So I would say with the animation of this film, it is pretty okay. It is a 2D drawn movie, so I do appreciate that. But it can look a bit too simplistic. Like, I'd imagine that the toaster character isn't like the hardest character to draw, as well as other characters like the lamp. I do think the character designs are pretty okay for an 80s animated movie. It's nothing too bad, it's just pretty simple for me. Hyperion Pictures isn't really the biggest animation studio that's under Disney. The budget for this movie seems like it wasn't that much, though it's really hard to say in the 1980s. There also really isn't much information about budgets when it comes to animated movies in the 80s from what I've looked up. 1987 to be specific. Another animated movie that I grew up watching a lot and really loved was The Chipmunk Adventure of Alvin and the Chipmunks, if you don't know. And with that movie, there really isn't an official production budget that we know of, but for what I'm seeing, it seems like it was just an okay movie in the box office. I'd say it was a just okay release, only making about $6.8 million, and considering the Brave Little Toaster's budget and box office was a third of that, I'm going to assume that this wasn't really a big budget movie. So for the money that was put into this, I'd say it did its job fine, though it could have looked better. All backgrounds have this like painted aesthetic and look to it. This movie isn't really breaking any records, but it is a very well done movie, and of course I do appreciate anything 2D animated nowadays, even if it is from the 80s. And from what I've learned, it seems like the animators who worked on this movie were ex-Disney employees and college graduates of Cal Art, so I'd imagine this movie did take its time when it comes to the art, animation, and design of it. I think it's a fine, passable movie for its looks. The editing for this movie I think is pretty well done. Throughout the movie, this is an adventure of these appliances going to find their master, so it's not going to be a very quick journey, and I think the transition between scenes are pretty well done. Like, I think this movie does a good job of actually showing them slowly, you know, go throughout this adventure. Like, it doesn't just cut to a bunch of scenes back and forth, it does take their time. So yeah, pacing and editing, I think this movie did a pretty good job. But yeah, I think the movie flows from one scene to another pretty well. I mentioned their voice actors before, and I think they all pretty much do a pretty good job, honestly. I think this movie has really well casted characters. Each one of them sounds like, you know, a toaster, a blanket, and a vacuum. Like, I especially love Kirby's voice actor because he's supposed to be this like mean, grumpy appliance, so I think they did a good job with casting him, you know, like a vacuum cleaner. I think if any one of the appliances, like a toaster or a blanket that I would have, if they came to life, they would probably sound like this. So I think the voice casting and direction, I think it all went great. Good voice acting. So now that we've talked about a few things, I think it's best that we get back to the actual plot of the movie. And trust me, I'm talking about some good things right now, but trust me, we're going to be getting into a lot of crazy things. So as the main group journeys through the city, they eventually have to stop for the night because it is getting dark out. This is the first night that these appliances are not at home, so it is going to be a very uncomfortable night for them. And for whatever reason, all the characters just start becoming assholes, specifically towards Blanky. As I mentioned, Blanky is a very young and innocent, kind of baby-like character, so he does get scared easily, so it makes sense that he'd want to cuddle up next to someone for the night, but for whatever reason, these characters just do not want to be anywhere near him, and it's very weird. Kids movies, especially back then, always had this issue where characters are just overly aggressive for no fucking reason, like out of nowhere. And I guess kids aren't really going to care too much, nor are they going to really point it out or really think about it too much. But as an adult, you start to realize, why do these characters just automatically just switch up on each other? It honestly just doesn't make any sense. I can understand not being comfortable, but like, you gotta be this rude? Like, these guys live together in the same house for multiple years. Is it too much to ask just to sleep next to someone for the night? Especially considering they're going out to, like, adventure into unknown territory. They've never really done this.
Hey, come on. How do you guys expect us to get there if you're fighting all the time?
So yeah, all the characters do eventually go to sleep. I can only imagine the writers wanted the Blinky to eventually grow to be a braver character, kind of just like the Toaster, if anything. But I'm pretty sure this doesn't really go anywhere in the film. So yeah, everyone is just an asshole to Blinky for no reason. The next morning, we find the main group going through a bunch of thorns, you know, making along in their adventure, going to see the master. They eventually make it to this meadow location where they meet a bunch of friendly animals that seem to be very interested in these appliances. I mean, if I was a frog and I just saw a random toaster just wandering around, I probably would be very impressed by that too. There is then this music piece that continues to play throughout them interacting with these animals, and there really isn't a lot of voice acting. It's kind of just a random scene that just happens, really, and they're just hanging around, kind of as if they just forgot about what their adventure was for, really. Like, I kid you not, they truly just goof around and then they just leave. Now, there's actually a very important scene that I do want to talk about. I had mentioned earlier that the previous night Toaster, specifically, as well as other people, but Toaster specifically, was being a real big asshole towards Blanky and, you know, not wanting to cuddle or sleep next to him. When they meet these animals, Toaster actually wanders off into the forest a little bit more and finds this flower. This flower wanted to cuddle up against Toaster, and I don't really know the science or specifics behind it, but the flower was very, you know, intrigued by the Toaster. And Toaster was a bit uncomfortable with this interaction, so he ran away from the flower, making it upset. You know, at least it's visually upset. The plant doesn't come to life, so that's important to know. But the plant does become very upset and begins to wilt away, implying that it's going to die. Now, this is a very weird scene because at first it's just very random until I learned that apparently the flower is supposed to represent the Blanky. They have the same color, and apparently that was intentional. They truly did want to have this scene to have Toaster just truly understand that he was kind of being mean and Blanky, and he doesn't want him to wilt away. It is very bizarre for them to go to this extreme. You know, we couldn't have just had anything else, but I guess we had to have this very extreme scene of a flower basically dying of depression. I feel like there could have been other ways of just making the Toaster and other characters just a little bit nice towards like Blanky a little bit more, but I guess it works. But again, it's just so bizarre. There's also this moment where Blanky gets slowly sucked into like a hole for where mice live, and it's weird because this scene just happens and it's not really like taken that seriously because, you know, they eventually just save Blanky, they get him out. I'm pretty sure they wanted to show that the Toaster is growing as a character by how he saved Blanky from being absorbed by the mice. But like mentioned, I feel like there could have been a better way for these characters just to be nicer to each other instead of just having something this extreme. So yeah, we move on. They eventually get more deeper into the forest, and of course night comes again, so they do have to set up for the night. And this is when Toaster just starts talking with other people and admits that he's going to try to be more nicer to Blanky, and I can only assume this encourages all the other characters to be nice towards Blanky. It kind of really just solves itself, but you know, whatever. At least everyone is like chill with each other. You know, they were all nice before they left the house. Like, they were all friendly and singing along and doing chores together, but the moment they left the house, they just started becoming just rude. But hey, at least we're now back to where we were as far as like them being chill. We then get a dream sequence by Toaster, but this dream slowly turns into a nightmare, and we even get a feature by Colosso is Crazy, so shout out to him for being in this movie. I know it was a lot of hard work for him to show his face, and this nightmare is very creepy and unsettling. I know the creators was talking about how they wanted to have a scene where the toaster falls into the bath because that's a very dangerous thing for a toaster, and of course no one should be doing that in general, especially being in the said bathtub. But after this nightmare, Toaster wakes up and everyone realizes that they're actually in the middle of a windstorm. During this storm, Blanky does fly away for a bit, and all the other characters of the main group try and go rescue him. And it's also during the scene where we get into some bit of a writing issue. Now, of course, in real life, if you want to, let's say, turn on a lamp, you would need to plug it in for it to work. You know, basic thing, you know, appliances need electricity to work. Well, the same thing is true with the brave little toaster, quote unquote. One of the main reasons why they couldn't just outright leave on their own is because they needed to bring vacuum with them and they couldn't just leave him behind, so they had to hook him up to a battery that's on the chair, so therefore he could leave. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole like debacle of their extension cables being random lengths. That already is a weird writing choice, but yeah, all the appliances need to be plugged in to be used. Well, it turns out that only matters when the writers want it to. There are so many times throughout this movie where Lampy and other characters just activates their function without being plugged in. The scene during the thunderstorm is a prime example of that. The lamp apparently can use his light bulb and shine a light without being plugged in. Now, maybe this is just the case for Lamp, and you know, I can make an exception for that. Maybe he's just special. He has a really special power, but other characters are using their, you know, feature, their actual purpose. They use them without being plugged in. And I don't really know why the movie just chooses when it wants to follow this rule. It's extremely inconsistent. It's just like, how the hell are these characters just doing whatever they truly want whenever they want? What's the point of even bringing the battery if it's actually not needed? Is it for special powers? Is it for special uses? Is it for boosted power? It really doesn't make sense, and the movie never truly explains it. We literally see the scene where Lamp is turning on his light bulb and he's not being plugged into anything. But I'll get more into other writing inconsistencies later. So the Lamp decides to come up with a big brain move here. He notices that the battery that they have is actually dead, so they can't really do much to help and find Blanky because Lampy wants to use his light to help. So yeah, he notices the battery is dead, so he decides to point himself up into the air where lightning is striking. Mind you, this is a windstorm that's happening, a thunderstorm, and he uses himself as a conductor to absorb the lightning from the sky to charge the battery. This, of course, is an insane idea. Now, of course, this is a kid's movie, whatever, you know, you gotta get the battery charged somehow. But by the way, this is fucking insane. And yes, I googled it. Using any type of appliance like this would cause an immediate forest fire. Lamps, especially made in the 80s, were not designed to be lightning rods. This would not only incinerate the lamp, causing it to basically explode, but of course it works, and Lamp gets seriously messed up and is very injured from channeling all the electricity back into the battery. And the next morning comes and they eventually find Blanky. So everything pretty much works out. You know, we have some rough patches here and there, but the adventure does continue. The main group eventually finds himself next to a waterfall and a chasm between two cliffs. Now, of course, this is a very impossible situation for a bunch of appliances, so they come up with a plan to cross the chasm. And this idea goes as well as you expected it. They basically all fall down except for Kirby, the vacuum cleaner, and there's this moment where Kirby has to basically be on his own. And mind you, the chair with the battery is gone, so Kirby is quite literally by himself. And like I mentioned, and again, I'll talk about it more, but he is still able to just move whenever he wants without being plugged in, because he jumps off the cliff to go and try and save his friends who are traveling down the waterfall. They eventually all meet up at the end of the waterfall, and they're all pretty much fine, though they do lose the chair and the battery. They still carry on. Their spirits are a little down, and the toaster isn't really that excited and cheery as he usually is, but he still carries on. They all do help Kirby move on because he isn't powered by anything, so they all have to carry him, and they eventually trip over a rock and find themselves all into quicksand. Seems like it's all going to be pretty much over for these characters until someone decides to save them. A random guy who collects junk and sells the parts to pretty much anyone who needs random parts and accessories from appliances, funny enough. After the characters of the main group realize where they are, they're met by a bunch of other, characters and appliances that are in this shop owned by this man who takes them apart. And this scene is very unsettling because there's a lot of horror to this, and someone comes in for a part and the main guy who owns the shop takes someone apart. It's very unsettling. It's kind of like he's taking him apart, he's murdering him. Kind of like that scene in Sausage Party where they all get to the fridge. They realize they're all getting chopped up and used for food. And of course, the main group does want to escape. And funny enough, they're told like, oh yeah, escaping is impossible. And there's even this musical number explaining how they're all doomed and they can't leave. So of course, the characters do believe this, but Lampy comes up with an idea to actually just take out the shop owner. And by the way, before I get to it, the other characters in the shop were basically all saying, oh yeah, no, this place is prison, you're not escaping. No matter what, we can't leave this place, you're not leaving. So after the main group comes up with a plan to scare the shop owner and get himself knocked out, they all leave. Now, the shop owner left to go get the main characters. Like, he left all the way to the swamp in his giant monster truck, which means he left the building. He was gone. Like, he wasn't there at the store. And now that they knocked him out, all of the characters just escape? I don't really understand why they needed him to be knocked out for them to escape. Was it because he had the keys to the door? I don't really think so, because there's this refrigerator character who's in the pinned up area where they're all at, and he just busts down the door. If he wanted to escape, why didn't he do this before? I'd imagine the guy has to drive his truck very far away looking for appliances. Even if it was a 10-minute drive to go to the swamp to find the characters in the quicksand, that would have been more than enough time for this ginormous refrigerator to bust through the fucking door. Was it because they didn't want to do it in front of people? There wasn't any customers there. It seems like this guy just owns the shop. He doesn't have any workers. There was one character there who was buying some parts, and he didn't really seem to give a fuck about the appliances coming to life. It truly does not make any sense why these appliances were so scared of trying to escape this place when they could have easily have done it at any time. Doesn't matter. The appliances and everyone escapes. The dog drives the car, he runs away, and yeah, including our main characters, they make their way to the city where they can get that much closer to the master. So I want to stop now and just talk about a few more things, because we're more than halfway done with this movie. Now, I've mentioned it before, the writing in this movie is just so inconsistent, it doesn't make sense half the time. There are so many characters who just breaks the rules that they are establishing in the beginning of this movie. Like, I can imagine some characters can move on their own without being plugged in, like the lamp, the radio, or the toaster or whatever. They pretty much prove that these characters can move on their own, but Kirby needed to be plugged in order to move. That was one of the main reasons why they couldn't just leave outright in the first place. They had it to have a battery for Kirby to be plugged into so he can carry all the other characters out the front door and he can come along with them. But just like I mentioned, he's able to jump off the cliff whenever he wants to without being plugged in. It doesn't make sense. I guess maybe if he has a little bit of charge, he can make a little bit of jump, but again, why is it so inconsistent? Why is Lampy able to turn on his light bulb without even being plugged in? When it comes to radio, it makes sense. He probably just has some really good batteries that he gets switched on and off, and him being a radio, it doesn't really need to be plugged into anything, just really be connected to a satellite. And there really isn't any examples of the toaster and Blinky, using their function outside. These type of things just don't make any sense, along with other times where they're, again, I didn't want to mention it too hard, but it is a thing to mention, like their extension cords are just random lengths, whatever the story decides it wants to. Characters don't seem to be bothered about what's going on. Even towards the end of the movie, the master just accepts what's going on. It doesn't think like, oh, why is this giant magnet trying to fucking murder me? Or like, why is my house appliances here? He doesn't seem to question things like this as well, because he's an idiot, I guess, but also he's kind of not an idiot considering what he's going to college for. And yeah, I already mentioned it earlier, the characters inside this shop, they decide to break out when the shop owner is down, but not when he's out. It really doesn't make any sense why they couldn't have just left. And like, I can understand like appliances coming to life and going to see their master. That's actually the least craziest thing about this movie, in my opinion. And of course, there's other issues with the movie just being very random at times. Like, I can understand and get what they wanted to do with the toaster and the flower scene, but this scene barely has any importance later on. Like, yeah, the toaster starts to act nice, but really everyone else, I don't really think they do also. I guess they do, but how come they also didn't have their moments? Maybe every other character met a flower in the forest and decided to be nice to Blanky. I don't know. Overall, the writing of this movie is very weird, very inconsistent, and if anything, just bad. And we are truly just beginning to see the creepy undertones of this movie, with the shop scene, the nightmare scene, Lampy nearly dying, like basically another character death. Now, talking about the book again, it actually, fun fact, it turns out that only about 4 lines of dialogue from the book actually ended up in the film. Apparently there was a lot of switch ups when it came to this adaptation. Like, things were switched around and they decided to have the graveyard scene actually at the end of the movie, which I do think is a better fit for this type of movie. Jerry Reese along with Joe Ranft was the ones writing this film, and apparently, according to what I'm reading, there's actually 20 minutes worth of story that never even made it in the final cut, and apparently has never been released to the public. I did try to do a little bit of research, but from what I'm seeing, there is a YouTube video by Toaster TV who has a 5-minute video about the deleted scenes from The Brave Little Toaster. Apparently, I don't really know for a fact if these are actually the deleted scenes. I'm also seeing reports that there's a scene during the dream sequence that Toaster has where he falls and he just stays there lifeless and motionless. And of course, there's also something else here that talks about other deleted scenes where Kirby has a dream with the young master, Chris with Rob for Chris's hat, Ernie talks with Rob and Chris. Ernie throws the rope and neck on Rob. I don't really know what is true and what isn't. All I know is this is what I could find about the writing with this movie and its deleted scenes. Who really knows if we'll ever even see them, or if the ones from this YouTube video is actually legit. It's very possible they could just be rough estimates. So yeah, writing is a bit of a mess, and that's all I want to talk about as far as this. I'll probably be mentioning it here later for something else. The music for this movie is pretty interesting. It is composed and conducted by David Newman. From what I read, the score was trying to match the themes and feelings for the adventure of which the characters were going on and be very dramatic, like the music that plays when they go out into the wilderness for the first time. That pretty much matches it pretty well. The certain instruments that you can hear with the animals when they meet them. While I do think that scene is very random, at least the music does match the environment pretty well, and whenever things decide to get dark and creepy, the music does a pretty good job with matching that tone. I think for the most part the music is very decent. It's nothing unique, it's nothing special, it's not really going to be something that a lot of people are going to remember it for, but at the very least I do think this movie did a good job with its soundtrack, and I do play a little bit of it here and there throughout the video, so yeah, give it a full listen. It's just very good background music, really. That's the best compliment that I can give it. I think if you're going to go on a drive and you want to listen to some music without any like singing, yeah, I'd say listen to it. It's pretty okay. The environments I do go to are pretty varied. It's not just they go into the forest and they see just the same forest here and there. They do truly go to a lot of different areas, so I do appreciate the movie for doing that at least. So it's not just a very generic adventure. Yes, I had mentioned that the scene where they get to the meadow is pretty random, and like I keep saying, I really do believe that is because of what happens in this scene. Yes, Toaster does learn to be a nicer person towards Blanky after interacting with the flower, and I keep saying that he was already nice to him before. The main group just had a really rough day after leaving, so him learning this lesson doesn't really have a major impact, and it just makes this whole meadow scene that much more odd, at least to me. I hope I'm making sense. So right now, I'm going to talk about the final part of the movie. So of course, the main group gets to the house of the master, and the reason why they know where he lives is because they go to a phone book and just tear out a page and actually just find out where he lives. And I guess the plan was to just ring the doorbell and just appear there, and the master was supposed to just accept them in. But we eventually find out that the master was actually, graduating. He's all grown up, and he was actually going to go to the summer house where all the appliances would have been. Yes, if the appliances would have stayed for about 1 to 2 more days, they unironically would have been able to stay with the master. Kind of funny how things turn out. And while the master goes to the summer house, he actually does randomly just get upset that appliances are missing. Like, I don't know if I've ever met a grown man who gets upset that his toaster from his summer house is missing, or his vacuum cleaner, or hell, his blankets. But we do get to see a scene where he actually repairs the AC unit, and we actually get this touching moment that, you know, the AC unit is being used and he's happy and he's not actually dead. So that is a very sweet moment. So eventually the main group finds themselves at the door, and once they get in, for whatever reason, the lamp answers the door, and I don't know why this is the case. This is just another example of something stupid happening, because if this was a person who was at the door, would the lamp just pretend to not be alive? Would he have just screamed and ran away? Like, what was his plan for answering the door here? So yeah, they eventually get in, and they realize that the master has a brand new house with brand new appliances. Every appliance at the summer house was essentially replaced by something better. I do remember them showing a more modernized vacuum and radio as well as lamp and everything. So yeah, the main group being here isn't very happy and comfortable knowing that they're here with newer models of themselves, essentially. They do meet a television friend who is pretty much their only best friend inside this house, who welcomes them in, explains what's been going on, but then a musical piece happens and they explain that these appliances are basically old news and they're not welcome here. It's a very weird music choice also. I don't really vibe with it that much. And then they get thrown out, literally thrown out into the trash, and get sent to the junkyard from a garbage truck. They then wind up at a junkyard where they realize that they're going to meet their end. All this is happening while the master goes back home. He's upset about his appliances not being there. The TV tries to explain what's going on by showing advertisements of where he can go to find the appliances or the main group. And it really does take a while for the master or Rob to kind of get the hint. So he eventually goes to the junkyard where the appliances are. And while the main group is here at the junkyard, they of course are met with their final boss, a giant trash magnet that magnetizes anything metal and puts them on a conveyor belt where they are crushed into cubes. Yes, crushed. And of course there is another music piece where the cars talk about how they used to be good, they used to be useful, but now they're here in a junkyard and they're about to die. A very gruesome death. And yeah, even the whole like compactor that like crushes them into cubes looks like a person. This scene is just very unsettling, really, and we haven't even gotten to the real scary parts. So of course the appliances are all running around trying to get away from the giant magnet, and for whatever reason this magnet really hates them. Like, he really hates these appliances now. They keep getting away, and this is all going on while Rob, the master, eventually gets there to the junkyard and realizes that his appliances are here. Now, for whatever reason, he doesn't question what's going on. He just says, oh, hey, everything is here. My vacuum, my blanket, my radio, my lamp, my toaster, everything is here. He just doesn't question anything at all, really. He just, for whatever reason, just knows these are the exact same appliances that are in his house, and he goes to take them home. All except Toaster, who watches from a distance, and as the master, or Rob, is going to take most of the appliances back to his car, the trash magnet, again, whose job is to crush cars and has been really hating on the main group this entire time, he gets really, really pissed off. His face begins to, go away. The scene gets very darker. In fact, the whole film puts on this red screen, implying that it's very fucking serious. He then turns on his magnet to a stronger power, and he sucks up as much as he possibly can, including the master, to put him on the conveyor belt. This puts him in a very serious situation where he is going to die. He is going to get crushed, and I kid you not, the movie makes it very dark and serious, like Rob is really going to be crushed. I don't know about all of you, but I don't think kids should be watching this movie after knowing this. Having a character literally getting crushed to death, like holy fucking shit. Now, I mentioned that the toaster isn't really being picked up yet. He hasn't been found, but he sees what's going on and Rob is literally about to die. And mind you, the scene is getting more red and dark and the music is getting extremely serious. So he sees this opportunity to climb up and he notices that there's a spot in the conveyor belt or the machine that's crushing everything down. And he realizes that he can jam the gears that's connected to all of it, therefore stopping the machine and killing Rob. And of course, this movie is called The Brave Little Toaster, so the toaster decides to do something brave and nearly sacrifice himself to save the master. Again, It's not as creepy as everything we just mentioned, but holy fucking shit, what a crazy thing to do. And yes, they show the toaster getting brutalized, and if this was a normal toaster, this man would have been out of commission. This would have been flattened. When I saw this scene for the first time as an adult, I nearly had my jaw on the floor. I cannot believe what I had just saw. Like, for whatever reason, this movie was being creepy, very unsettling, very whatever, and random throughout, but then it decides out of nowhere that it wants to be an absolute horror film. But of course, this is a kid's movie, so it doesn't go that far, though I would argue that it pushes the boundaries and goes way beyond the goalpost. And the day is saved because the toaster is brave and he sacrifices his life to save the master. But he is later revealed to be fine. He was actually saved by the master and repaired so him and all of his friends can finally go home with the master after nearly effing dying, and they all lived happily ever after until they went to Mars. So yeah, The Brave Little Toaster. Where do I even start, man? This movie, like I mentioned, is just so many things. It is definitely a horror movie. It is a musical because there's a lot of musical numbers, and it's an animated movie. But yeah, it's a horror movie. There are so many things in this movie that I do not think a child should be watching. Not only that, there are so many times in this movie where characters are just being overly aggressive, and I don't think that's a good thing for kids to be watching. I don't think they should learn that it's okay to be aggressive towards your friends. Now, I know eventually they all become chill with each other. They're not as pissed off at each other. They do eventually care about each other and become nice. But there was just no reason for these characters to all just be assholes towards Blanky. But yeah, this movie has a lot of creepy things that I just don't think a kid should really be watching. If anything, it's a good thing that I don't remember this movie that much. Either way, this movie is very serious and very dark at random times. So yeah, maybe a child should just wait a little bit longer before watching this movie. I don't really know. Maybe they'll just forget about it. When it comes to the themes of this movie, they wanted to tell the story about what appliances would be like if they came to life and being useful, and what would happen if they weren't being used and abandoned, and wanting to be reunited by someone that you love. I think the movie does this pretty well, though I don't really know how it could really apply to a lot of people watching this movie. Like, yeah, if you love something, you should try and seek it out and go for it and be brave. That's the best way I can, cope with the whole theme of this and make it make sense. A lot of random things do happen, and of course, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and this movie reminds me of Toy Story a lot, where you have the characters going out to seek someone that they love and care for. But this movie did come out before Toy Story, so as far as I know, it's pretty original for its time, and most likely people are going to remember Toy Story more than this. Now, I've talked a lot about this movie, and overall, I thought when I first saw this movie, I remember just liking it a lot. I actually, as a kid, remember saying, like, yeah, I really love Brave Little Toaster. I can say this is probably one of the movies I really loved as a kid. As an adult, I can't really say that I'm in love with this movie as much as I was back then. This movie has a lot of issues, specifically with its writing. The animation and art settings are pretty okay, but basic as well. The music, while pretty okay and pretty good for its themes, doesn't really do anything to stand out. I think the voice acting and characters are pretty well done, and the random tones that this movie goes for is kind of weird and unsettling, and I don't really know who this movie is truly for. Like, yeah, if you want to see like a We Have Toy Story at Home type of movie, then this definitely would be the movie. But really, I can't really say that I truly enjoyed this movie. I think there are things to like about it, but really, there is a lot of things that I don't like. And yeah, the scary and horror aspects is something that I'm not really a big fan of, especially in these kids movies. Maybe it could work, but just overall, every aspect of this film doesn't really do anything to like really stand out when it comes to other movies that came out around its time. I would say that this movie is fine, but it is really batshit insane. If anything, I like talking about it because it's a crazy fucking movie, and I do believe people may enjoy watching this just to be, creeped out. But overall, like I said, there are a lot of things in this movie that are just not special and unique. There are a few things that are pretty okay and pretty great, but it's really just a few things. And the things that I mentioned are bad are pretty noticeably bad. Everything else is very average, if not below average. So with that being said, I'm giving this a 4 out of 10. There's a lot of issues with this movie. There's a lot of things that definitely could have been changed. There's a few things here and there sprinkled that are very interesting, but again, everything is just average and pretty just standard for an 80s movie. I think this movie could have been a lot better. If I ever watched this, I would definitely just watch it in the background. But regardless, whatever happened with this movie, it was apparently successful enough to get 2 more sequels. And I can't really know if I'll make a video on them, so who knows what that. But anyway, I have been talking for a very, very long time, and I want to get on with my life. This was a deep dive into The Brave Little Toaster, and I hope everyone who watched this movie till the end enjoyed it. And yeah, everyone, what do you think of The Brave Little Toaster? Let me know, comment, and yeah, I will see you in another video.